It's week 18. We're going to go through the big issues of this particular week. Some games that matter, some that don't. Some that might, decisions that might matter for next year. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more with our good friend Alan Soslowski here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast brought to you by No House Advantage. I'm Jeff Erickson. He's Alan Soslowski. We're switching chairs here a little bit. Usually Alan's running and driving the sneaky pickups. We're doing a sneaky podcast instead. Alan, thanks for joining me. What's going on?
Very sneaky podcast. No, it's we talk a little bit about these week 18 championships. There's more week 18 championships out there than I thought. I thought maybe it was like fringy 3%. I still think about 20% of leagues, 2 in every 10, 1 in every 5 is a week 18 championship. And why is that? It's because as fantasy football continues to grow and get bigger and people get introduced to it, they don't know any different. They don't understand the ramifications of having it. So the bigger it gets, the more week 18 championships you actually see.
Yeah. And, you look at the schedule, most of these games have meaning. There's a lot of games that have meaning. I think about the teams that are resting starters this week. It's pretty small. It's the Giants, probably the Bucks. They might even start some of these players, but they won't finish. Kind of like the Jaguars last week, as you, Alan Soslowski, predicted.
Warned.
You were the. No one listened to you. No one would pay attention to me.
Yeah,
I did listen to you a little bit. I just had no choice.
Yeah, and that's what it was. And what we're referring to is that last week there was a lot of debate whether the Jaguars would rest players, and there was great arguments on both sides of that conversation. And the only credit I'll take was that I said that if you have better options, which in your case you did not, use it as a tiebreaker because there was 2 situations in which the benching could happen. 1, they were in blowout mode, or 2, Trevor Lawrence took some big hits and they were up 20-0 at one point, and there was just no reason.
Yes, 21-0 after the pick 6. It's like
there it is,
done.
Which is the worst because the pick 6 means that you didn't even get your points for your offensive skill guys.
Right. And the thing is, and at Liss, it was even worse because I had Lawrence. He had Lawrence, Etienne, who at least he got something from, and Christian Kirk. So, seeing that and seeing JaMychal Hasty score the first one, and then Snoop Connor just for good measure there. It's just like,
it was literally the worst case scenario if you started Jaguars. Although, didn't Etienne get his points, though?
Etienne got the long touchdown, so he was fine. But everybody else, not so much. So let's start at quarterback. Kind of interesting thing here. No Justin Fields this week. You're going to with Nathan Peterman, because Fields has a hip, and that's the thing I'm thinking about. But I don't think that's really it. I think it's just maybe it's the shoulder and the foot and the hip and all that they want to protect him. But I kind of think they really do want to preserve draft position a little bit. I think that's got to be part of their matrix a little bit. My question to you, Alan, you are a big dynasty guy. How much difference is there between the first pick and the second pick this year?
Well, what's interesting about in dynasty rookie drafts, you're talking about, right? Not in a particular startup draft, but in dynasty rookie drafts, there's an elite running back prospect coming out. That's Bijan Robinson. I mean, obviously we have to see where he falls, right? I mean, he could be in a terrible situation and things change. And then there's going to be at least 2 quarterbacks. So in like a super flex league, pick 1, 2, and 3 all have their merits. But let's talk about in like a traditional 1 quarterback league, there's going to be 2 running backs that are number 1 overall pick worthy. So it's not that big of a deal. I mean, Bijan Robinson is probably going to have this Zeke Elliott or Saquon Barkley like status as far as hype. Who knows? Again, we could see if he lands, for example, in a place that has another credible running back like Houston. Let's say for some reason they go back to the well and they have 2 credible running backs there, then their stock will fall. But if they end up in a landing spot does drive dynasty ADP.
But what about real life, though? I mean, like the first pick in the draft.
Oh, okay.
The Texans are 2-13-1. The Bears are 3-13. The Texans are playing the Colts. The Texans are playing better than the Colts right now. There is currency in being able to trade the pick. The Bears aren't going to draft a quarterback. The Texans will, almost certainly, right? the Cardinals are sitting there at 4-12, one game behind the Bears. The Broncos are at 4-12. The Colts 4-11-1. They're right there too. They need a quarterback. Either having that first overall pick to trade or to actually select a player. I mean, it's pretty big. I mean, what about the kid from Alabama, the defender? I mean, Anderson, isn't that a guy that's considered number 1 overall worthy too?
I believe that you're right in that the higher your pick is, even if you want it, it holds more value, right? The number 1 pick is going to have more value than the number 2 pick, and so on and so forth. Now, you may have a tier. If you're a team, you may have a tier of players that you like there, so it doesn't matter. But it's going to basically have more currency on the trading market. So I do think it's a big deal, probably as far as player quality, as far as these early evaluations go. I don't think it's that different. But if you're a team in the quarterback market, it makes a huge difference because you're going to have a preference. You don't know which one of those quarterbacks. Now, if you like one of the defenders and you think you can get them a few picks later, somebody is going to want to trade up and give you that mother load. If there's a pick 2, they may not want to give you that huge return on pick 3. So I think you said about Nathan Peterman, there's no player that defines that we're tanking more than Peterman. It's not like you're putting in even Skylar Thompson, which they're forced to play Miami, but it's Nathan Peterman says it's over, Johnny. We need that.
Or anything that the Colts have done since hiring Jeff Saturday, or even before that when they installed Sam Ehlinger as their starting quarterback and benched Matt Ryan back in a while now.
You give them too much credit, Jeff. I think that they actually thought Sam Ehlinger, I forgot how we're pronouncing it, was the play. I think that it's just pure incompetence on the Colts side. Maybe
so. But I gotta say, I mean, it's everything they do, and including their time management decisions and at the end of games, for instance. It just strikes me as we're tanking. But I don't know. It's wild though. I mean, the Cardinals are going to be starting David Blau. The Texans will use their hybrid quarterback system. By the way, the Texans extra credit for the way they handled, putting in Allen for a couple of games and finding a way to be worse at quarterback. It really it can always get worse. I think that's one of the things we always have to remember.
And who was the guy that
it can always get worse?
Right, of course. And then who was the other quarterback that has tight end eligibility in fantasy? There you go. I mean, they really figured. I liked that they were playing like a rotation at quarterback. It was kind of comical, but
it was cute for that Cowboys game. And then after that, it hasn't done a darn thing. It hasn't worked at all.
But as what we've seen in the real NFL draft, what we think we know is not always what happens. I mean, what we know now, I mean, in the Joe Burrow, Tua, and Herbert draft, I mean, Joe Burrow was kind of the consensus 1-1 at that point, but nobody had Justin Herbert I'm sure somebody, I shouldn't say that, but most of the consensus rankings had Herbert as the quarterback 3, right? I mean, I'm sure there was some people out there. And meanwhile, if you had the lower pick, that was the spot, right? So, and I think that happens. It's sometimes the player that goes later ends up being the better player. We see it all the time, especially in quarterback evaluation.
Well, especially where they land is important too. I mean, landing on a team that can actually be competent enough to develop said quarterback helps. I don't think there's a whole lot of development going on with the Chargers because, Herbert was in game 2 after, all the reports saying in the beginning of the season, oh, he's having a hard time picking up the offense. He may not play at all this year, at least until, you get a team doctor stabs him the wrong way, stabs Tyrod Taylor the wrong way.
Right.
Next thing, boom.
Remember, that's right. They didn't even want Justin Herbert to start at that point. They didn't even realize what they had. It's
balled out against the Chiefs, and boom, you're off we go.
It's almost as incompetent as starting Tom Savage over Deshaun Watson in the first game of his rookie season, but to their credit, it only took a half until they realized that, right? They didn't keep it going for multiple games.
Yeah, that's right. Other quarterback news this week, the Commanders, now that they realize that they are out of the playoffs, Sam Howell's getting the start.
Do you know at one point that Sam Howell was considered the QB1 in this class? Now, this class is obviously, it's not, Kenny Pickett, who was a late first round pick. By the way, I like Kenny Pickett. We'll get into all that. But Sam Howell was the consensus 1-1. And then that last year of college football happened. And, he basically ends up being a 5th round pick. What if, right? I'm surprised that the Commanders didn't do this sooner, but I guess that they were on a roll with Taylor Heineke. The Carson Wentz experiment, obviously, it was a Riverboat Ron failed gamble. You can't win them all. But I'm excited to see Sam Howell because if he's actually good in this week, regardless if it's a meaningless game, meaningful game for him, that that means that Washington doesn't necessarily have to go into the veteran QB market again. I mean, there's so many fake trades out there right now. Like, for example, if Brock Purdy brings the San Francisco 49ers to the promised land, right, he gets all the way home with a Super Bowl appearance and even a Super Bowl title, could that mean that someone like Washington gives their first-round pick for Trey Lance, right? I mean, there's all these crazy things that could happen. But if Sam Howell shows something, Washington doesn't even have to be in that market, so I think that's a significant game.
Yeah, Sam Howell, by the way, is he got punished for staying 1 year extra year at college. All of his talented teammates left, and he got left kind of holding the bag, trying to develop other guys. Although you look at who that Carolina's got now, they may have another quarterback that's a stud in the NFL someday.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's but that's what the NFL draft is, right? I mean, that's why when we're talking about these prospects right now, so much is going to change between someone having small hands or somebody, running a 1/10 of a second slower in a 40-yard dash. We change our evaluations. Remember, at this time last year, Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, they were fringe first-round picks and got all the way up into some mock drafts as top 3, top 5 picks for Malik Willis. And then the guy's a third rounder, and it looks like he might have even been drafted 2 rounds too early.
Yeah, that seems like it there. But, and the verdict's still out on Lance, too. That's the other thing. We don't even know what Trey Lance is yet.
It's the craziest thing, including his final year of college football, which was he barely played. That was the COVID year.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. So, we'll see what the Niners are going to do.
What would you do, though?
Healthy for the playoffs. Do you start Purdy, by the way?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you cannot go away from Brock Purdy at this point, right? I mean, yeah, I don't think you can. But what if Purdy gets all the way home? What if he's been how he is? Basically, this level of play continues, and you're in the Super Bowl. Let's say you lose the Super Bowl, but Purdy still has a solid game. You lose to the Chiefs or whoever. It's like not an embarrassing loss. Do you agree that Brock Purdy as your starter is in play, or is that just like, hey, 8-10 game sample doesn't mean anything? Like, where do you fall on that?
I mean, they invested so much to get Lance. I mean, yes, that investment's gone. It's hard to get away from that. I mean, it really depends on like how Purdy plays in those games. Like if he balls out.
260-2 with 1 pick, and he's not the reason they lose. He distributes the ball. And I'm just saying, like you just talked about the investment, the sunk costs for Lance. What if they can get a piece of that back? They paid up. I was going to say 3 first, but it's really 2 first extra. So if they can get one of those back and maybe a late pick, then it's not so bad,
Yeah, I agree. And I agree, principal sunken costs, suggest that shouldn't matter. If you can recover it, like, the Cardinals, they screwed up by drafting Josh Rosen, but at least they got a 2nd-round pick right back after that a year later. I mean, at least they got as much as they could right away. And if they had waited, they would have got nothing and liked it. So, and, the verdict's still out on Kyler, by the way. And I know there is some talk about some complications with his surgery. Some news came out on that today. So we don't know what Kyler's going to be next year. I don't know if Cliff Kingsbury is going to be around next year. There's a whole big mess in Arizona.
That the Arizona Cardinals quarterback position, I mean, it's either that's the veteran market, right? You're going to want the Jacoby Brissett type of fill in there. Someone a veteran that comes in that knows they're in a 10, 11 game window until Kyler's back up and running, because you just pointed out, even if things went great for Kyler Murray's surgery, we weren't going to see him in September. And I doubt we would see him, anytime before the early November, maybe, a compromised version. So the veteran market, I mean, this is going to be, it's funny. I'm seeing some early best balls go off right now, Jeff, and we're talking about, mid-January, and nobody wants to play in Superflex right now because the quarterback position is such in flux. There's only, I mean, what is there, about 8 or 9 teams that have their set starter that you feel good about? If you go through it, maybe 10, a third of the league. Everyone else is like, when you think about like the Jets, for example.
Why would we want to think about the Jets?
Well, because they're an example of a good team that has that the quarterback probably isn't even on the roster right now.
Probably not. And I think one of their starting offensive linemen isn't on the roster either. I think that's the other big issue for them too. I think that offensive line is a big contributor to why Wilson looked so bad and why Mike White looked so bad against the Seahawks last week. Plus, I think they rushed White back. I don't think he was ready. But he's also Mike White. I mean, he's also just I think this happens a lot. We see the backup quarterback in a controlled environment or come in late in the game or maybe get a spot start and looks great. Like, oh yeah, our QE issues are fixed. Jarrett Stidham, starting quarterback next year. Might be, but it might also be that dead cat bounce, too.
Yeah, and Mike White is the average-looking guy standing next to a really ugly guy, right? I mean, that guy's not so bad looking. It's the guy next to him is the horrendous guy. So standing next to Zach Wilson, Mike White looks like the savior, right? And Mike White, if he was, Joe Burrow's backup, we'd be like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good backup. That's a Chad Henne type backup. We're okay with him. But yeah, standing next to Zach Wilson, who might not even be the 40th best quarterback in the league. He might be a low-end backup. Everything looks good.
Indeed. We're going to talk running backs here in a second, but first, quick note, No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. Play in pick'em contests versus other people for the shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot at hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 times your entry if you hit all of your picks. Bet on up to 5 player prop over-unders or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. Sign up now with promo code NHAWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at nohouseadvantage.com or download the app on the app stores to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today. Experience daily fantasy sports redefined, because it's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to miss out on this. Big thanks to No House Advantage. They've been with us all season long. Let's discuss a couple of other running back situations. And again, everything is in the context this week of like, okay, we're preparing for the playoffs. Are we looking for the future? What are we nursing injuries? Like, I don't know, a couple teams like the Giants. Obviously, the big candidate to be rested is Saquon Barkley. If anybody on the Giants is going to be rested, it's going to be Barkley. At last I saw, we haven't seen anything like that. That we have not seen that they're going to rest their starters yet. I'll admit, in the last 30 minutes, I haven't been on top of the news, so I haven't seen if Daboll's announced anything yet. But what's your take on the Giants situation?
I mean, the take on week 18 is if the team doesn't have anything to play for, you have to treat it like a preseason, like preseason 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, or whatever that version of that is now. It's preseason 2, where if you want to play Saquon Barkley and there's no news of if he's starting or not, you can bank on, I would say, 12 minutes, 1 quarter of production. After that, anything's a bonus. And there's a chance you'll only get 1 or 2 series, right? So that's how you have to treat it. So if you want to roster like DFS-wise, you want to take a gamble on, Matt Breida or any of those guys. But if you're counting on these guys in a championship game, just understand there's zero floor for a team that has nothing to play for. And he's a fragile superstar player that they're going to need to carry the ball 30 times the following week.
Yeah, the floor is lava for sure.
It's worse than lava.
Yes,
right.
It is. The floor is the ocean. It's the Marianas Trench. We got the dreaded Barkley wants to play update up on the site, by the way.
Don't
wants
fall
to
for
play
it.
Is never predictive. I mean, you see this all the time, every year.
Imagine Barkley does not want to play. Imagine that note.
Yeah. Barkley, soft man, doesn't want to play. I don't get that at all.
Yeah, I mean, again, so if you're an experienced fantasy football player, you already know this. But if you're new to fantasy, or if you have a Week 18 championship, this is one of the I'm not going to say the arguments. This is one of the counterpoints not to do it. Now, some people like this; they like the chaos of Week 18. Obviously, I mean, we play in a Week 18 total points league, but obviously you could pick up and drop players. So just understand this: the variance is so much greater for all the Giants. For Daniel Jones too. I mean, it's almost no shot he's playing a full game, if at all. He'll play, but just not a full game.
Another team to watch for: Minnesota. Believe it or not. Now, this is the one after getting thrashed last week, I don't think they want to like mail it in against a divisional rival, the Bears, but the thing, and they can't control their destiny. They can win and it might not matter. They still might be the 3 seed anyhow. Because the Niners are a massive favorite over Arizona, more likely to be the 2 seed. It matters to be home field, but they've been blown out on their home field already. So I guess I don't think it's that much of a fortress. So do they play their starters?
Yeah, I think they do. I think that it does matter because if they're the 2 seed, for example, right, and say San Francisco is the 3rd seed, it's not so much that their home field is a fortress. That's a great way to put it. It's just that they're at a tremendous disadvantage if they have to go to San Francisco in the 2nd round.
Yeah.
So I think it's yes, I agree that their home field is. Let's just anecdotally say it's worth a point and a half. San Fran not having to travel, and do all that is probably worth a full 3, the type of team they are. So they'll play as long as there's something to play for. And obviously, if they feel that their quarterback, again, there's more risk than like week 9. So if Kirk Cousins takes a big shot, or if any other key player that you're counting on for fantasy, it gets injured, their chances of going back in are probably, there's more risk than normal.
Yeah. And on top of all that, the Vikings lost 2 starting offensive linemen.
There it is.
Against the Packers. Brian O'Neill and Austin Schlottman, both done bad. One a torn Achilles, the other, I think, a broken bone in his leg. So and I think they're down to their 3rd center now. So that's a real problem. So that's the other thing is performance-wise, it's against the Bears. So you love the matchup, but it's not guaranteed when you have a bad offensive line or being with a replacement center.
Yeah, we're going to keep repeating that same theme with the exception of, I could say, more than a handful of games. Any of the key fantasy players, you have to think of them more in a preseason context than you do in a championship context. Unless there's some clarified, like you said, for example, Nathan Peterman has more certainty this week. Now, it might be a lower, not a lot of ceiling there, but he has, he could have a Jared Stidham outcome too as well. I mean, we always think back that Nathan Peterman is the example of a complete worst quarterback ever in the NFL because of how grandly and publicly he failed with like a 5 interception half. But we know he's taking all 4 quarters worth of snaps. We know he's throwing to, there's going to be, professional pass catchers out there that are playing for a contract. The Bears just gave a 1-year extension to Equanimeous St. Brown, EQ St. Brown. So they're giving out, the pass catchers are going to be playing for something. Some of them won't be on the roster. So just keep that in mind about who actually has something to play for and treat the Stars like it's preseason.
Yep. Another team in that same context, the Bucs, they are locked into the 4 seed. They're not going to catch the 3rd seed, and they're a division champ. So they're going to be the 4 seed. I think it would be insane to play their starters. They have nothing to play for. So, Kyle Trask is going to be active. Brady is starting. They said that Todd Bowles said that Brady will start the game. It could be like he hands one hand off, then trots off the field, maybe gets 1 series. The thing is weird. It's they finally got the deep game going last week. They were captain check down for 16 weeks this year, and then they finally got the deep ball going. You want to build off that, but that's also because Carolina's missing a key corner. You just don't want him getting hit. You don't want their offensive lineman getting hit. Talk about offensive line attrition. Tampa's had that all year.
Does Brady have any records that he's going for? I mean, not just seasonal records, but
does he have any left? I mean, right, is there any left? I mean, so I haven't heard of any.
Neither have I. But to sometimes just build on your career yardage. He doesn't want anybody to catch him wherever he is. So you could see maybe a half and add another 150, maybe 180 yards, chuck it downfield a few times. Now I know that's a factor, right? Maybe that's why he's playing. So again, we're just to repeat, you have to be careful. But yeah, it looks like that the Tampa came alive last week. And if you had Mike Evans and drafted him in the 3rd round, even aggressively in the 2nd round, that was one thing that I was wrong about. But hey, if you survive somehow, congratulations on your championship this week.
Yep. Clipboard Jesus is like, didn't Nick Foles throw 7 TDs in the final week? I think he did. And then there's Matt Flynn, who went off too, and then got a contract with the Seahawks because of that. Probably don't want to need to bring that one up there, clip with the Seahawks icon there. It all worked out. They drafted Russell Wilson. They just ate the contract with Flynn, but still.
By the way, Clipboard Jesus, who's in our chat right here, I know he's in he's in a lot of my leagues, but he's in one of my leagues, and I won a bet with him. We bet who would have a better fantasy season, Javonte Williams or Zeke Elliott. Obviously, you know what side I was on that. I won that, so he's got to pay my entry fee into a. Right, I won that. Right, I won it in week 4. He's got to pay my entry fee to one of my leagues this year, so I'm glad he's here because I just remembered that.
in your face. That's basically what you're trying to say there. I got other issues to bring up, but first, quick note from our friends at Monkey Knife Fight. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action that you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, they've got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. Just easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and you'll get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. Also, all of our podcasts are on the Blue Wire Network. Here's a couple other ads. Thank you for your indulgence on that. We do thank the Blue Wire Network. We've been with them all year long, not just all season, but all year long, and do appreciate that. It's nice to have a nice home where all of our podcasts are going to be. Let's talk a little bit about, you want to talk about things that you got right, things that you got wrong, or we got wrong. Not we. Yeah.
I mean, it's right. I think that really the reason I want to talk about these consensus opinions that nobody really bit back on that were completely wrong is because when you go into next draft season and you have these thoughts and beliefs about players, and then you get influenced, which you often talk about the noise around you, just hold steady and just question everything. Because how many of these things, Jeff Erickson, did you jump on the bandwagon with? So let's start with the Tyreek Hill was going to have lower value because he wasn't with Patrick Mahomes anymore.
Considering he was on my best teams all year, I'm not going to fall on that sword. I mean, I did have him lower than the end of the first round, which is where he was going previously. So yeah, I was semi-guilty, but no, I
like the price.
Him up at the end of the second round a lot.
Yeah, you know what? I'm thinking back. I was out. I was like, oh, Tyreek Hill is a horrible pick with Tua. I was on that train. So yes, you were taking him at ADP, which was late round 2, early round 3, if you were lucky.
Yeah, I wasn't like, I'm not going to claim victory. Like I nailed it, but I took the value given.
All right. So in that same vein, number 2 was AJ Brown had lower value because he was now just one of many targets. He was no longer, the primary target, even though it was on a low volume offense. Did you fall on that sword?
No, I'm on board. I have AJ Brown in a lot of teams too. So
did you?
Not going to take that one either.
Do you acknowledge though that these were consensus opinions or powerful?
No,
they were.
I think that I never thought that was like a hot take in our industry. I never heard that one a lot. What I heard more was I may not be paying price for him because he got hurt. He gets hurt too much. I think that is more where I think if he got a discount, it's because of that. I mean, often I was like, choosing between AJ Brown. I wanted to get to, Tyreek, AJ Brown, and the third one in that equation was, who was it? There's another. Oh, Debo. Sometimes Debo there. And I sometimes I did choose Debo to my dismay. Had I gone AJ Brown instead of Debo, I would have won one league instead of lost in the finals. But that's another story.
All right, I'll give you one that I know that you were on this bandwagon.
Okay, Josh Jacobs, right?
Well, everybody. Yeah, that's a great one. Jacob's on my list too. So yeah, and people say, I like that. So here's one. You're a donkey if you're taking Derrick Henry in the top 3 picks. I'd rather get off a year too early than a year too late. Coming off the big injury, missed a half season. There's no way this is it for Derrick Henry. It's over. Derrick Henry was falling to the second round as we got up to Labor Day. So,
well, I wasn't taking him top 3, so I'll agree.
Top 5. I mean, you were like, all right, you were settling to take him at pick 10, pick 9-ish,
14-ish. Even
exactly. See,
yeah, for sure. I was so yeah. I will definitely take. I'll fall on that sword. Although didn't play in our fantasy championship game, missed others. He had diminishing returns. He had some awesome games, but he had some not so awesome games late too. And I might not take him in the first round next year either, Alan.
And you might, and that's what I'm saying. Like that narrative is going to continue again.
I don't think I was taught any lesson there.
That's my point. That's my point.
I'm incapable of learning.
I'll give you another one. And I think this one was one of the most debated topics. There was 2 wide receivers in that this was like, you had to choose sides on this. The first one was Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown, going back to last year, had an 8-game heater where he literally, I know we use the term league winner. He literally was a league winner. And the people that push back said that there was no TJ Hawkinson, there was no DeAndre Swift there. So he was just, he benefited from being force-fed targets, and that wasn't going to continue. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown heading into next year is going to be a late fringe first-round pick.
Probably. I'd say second-round pick is my bet. There's a lot of great receivers. And Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't get the red zone targets as much as these other receivers. So I think he'll go behind A.J. Brown, for instance. I think he'll go behind Tyreek Hill, for instance. I don't think those are big revelations. I think he'll go behind, let's see.
Here, I'll give it.
Yeah.
Well, will he go ahead or behind Stephon Diggs?
Oh, behind.
Okay.
Because, Josh Allen, not Josh Allen. I think that's part of it. I know Diggs has had this stretch run where it's a little worrisome, but
really bad.
I have Diggs ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown this week. Why would I take a St. Brown ahead of him next year? I think he goes behind CD Lamb. He goes behind Devontae Adams next year. He's a second rounder. There's no shame in that. That's a good, end of the second round. He is a good spot to be in. That top 24 player. That's awesome. I don't think he goes much sooner than that.
All right. Well, I'll give you one more. The other guy was Gabe.
I was wrong about him. I was taking Allen Robinson over him, for crying out loud. That fourth round was just littered as a minefield, littered with losses there.
Yeah, I know we're up against here, trying to make this a nice tight podcast for Week 18. Yes. But what I'll give you the other one that I had. You talked about Allen Robinson, but the other one was Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis was getting aggressively drafted in the third round. And even after week one, when he did have a big game in those leagues where you're allowed to draft, he was going in the late first round, early second round. So what was it about Gabe Davis, I guess, quickly, that you think that we can learn for next year? Is there anyone that mirrors that production profile that we're getting excited about? Just think back to the rookies.
You're of an age that you would get this reference. Alvin Harper. I think he's the new Alvin Harper.
The Cowboys number 2 back in the day.
Yeah, just feast or famine. Darnay Scott. Like a guy that is going to hit a big play every once in a while, but he's not getting the volume. He just isn't. And I think I got all about. I got all about Gabe Davis, and the NFFC offers the online championship drafts after that Thursday game. You get to keep the stats from that game. So going in, Josh Allen went off. Gabe Davis went off. Gabe Davis went up to the third round or so. Josh Allen in the second round. You knew. I did the recency bias draft.
You've heard of the term league winner. We overuse it in fantasy. Gabe Davis was a league loser, right? Him, yeah. Allen Robinson. So I think those are the lessons learned. It's Chase Claypool would have been the example a couple of years earlier where he had 10 touchdowns, but what was it? 4 of them were in one game. Another 3 were in another. So
I still want to believe in Chase Claypool, but man, I was so wrong about him at the trade deadline. I thought, that's a good trade for the Bears. They needed to get Justin Fields, a real wide receiver. They never used him, or maybe he just didn't get the offense. Maybe, obviously, it can't just be one team that's wrong now. You got to wonder what the heck's going on with him. So I'll be very circumspect about him next year. They
basically traded pick 33.
Yes.
For him for a 1-year deal. And even if the Bears have the second pick, you may be asking why not pick 34. It's because the Dolphins don't have a first round pick this year. Remember, they got their pick taken away from them with the whole
cheating.
Yeah,
for having
cheating.
A bad owner.
There's only 31 picks in the first round this year.
Indeed. Alan, this is fun. I wish I could have. I wish we could have got started sooner because we had so much more we could talk about. But I unfortunately I'm up against a radio hit, so we're going to wrap this one up tight. Alan, thanks for jumping on. Super fun doing this. We'll be keep having you on at Sirius XM every Monday. You're still on Sundays with Jim Coventry. Check out Alan there.
And also, we'll be doing a Dynasty Focus podcast next week on Sirius XM. We're going to do 2 episodes that'll air the weekend of the 14th, 15th.
Nice.
So we'll get some Dynasty content up there for RotoWire 2 on Sirius XM 87.
And we'll eventually be doing the Dynasty rookie draft again, mock drafts. I'm in. I'm all about that. I'm in. Count me in.
It forces you to do some early research, and by the time the rest of the market, the redraft market is talking about rookies, you almost feel like a pro when you do all that stuff in March and April.
Exactly. Hey, great stuff, Alan. Great. Thanks everybody for listening. We got our regular podcast tomorrow. Mario and John, thanks for listening to our podcast all season long. I'll be doing one more next week with Chris Liss on Wednesday. So thanks everybody for listening. Take care.